Hello and welcome to Call of Discovery, the podcast where we get excited about Keyforge, its fantastic community that maybe isn't quite so happy, or not everyone's quite so happy today, and the excitement of Discovery as we discover new Keyforge formats. I am here, as always, Ed Pocock, and I'm joined by the most wonderful. He's turned Canadian for a few days, but he might be back in the US. I'm unsure about where that border lies exactly. Zach Armstrong, how you doing?
I'm well. As far as Keyforge goes, I think the US and Canada are pretty well united at this point. We are a singular Keyforgian entity between the two nations.
That is incredibly exciting. Incredibly exciting. And there's less VAT and all that good stuff that we're enjoying in Europe. So Christian, I can't wait until you've got some printers functioning in Europe so that we don't have to deal with the conversion costs at the moment. But
yeah, that's pretty nasty.
But we'll deal with that later. I'm going to be paying for things with Keyforge cards in a year, Zach. It's just going to be the way that it goes down. So this game had better go well. I think the stakes are pretty high for me.
Oh man, that's funny.
But we got some news, haven't we?
We do. We are so Keyforge is in just such a time right now with the Ghost Galaxy buying them, and then the GameFound, and then with the test formats and the Keyforge Celebration news that just dropped very recently as we're recording here. We decided to jump on and talk about this. Ed and I are looking to just jump on and talk about the things that excite us as we just keep going with Call of Discovery here. And this was something that excited us. So I am literally speaking into a cheap mic on my headset, sitting in a chair many thousands of miles from my regular little recording studio. That's how excited I am to.
And yet, Zach, you still sound just as professional as most podcast hosts in their natural habitat. So I think that is impressive. You are the only person to take the Smash for Emergency podcast gear set with you on holiday.
Oh, not quite. That's probably more of a ding on my regular setup than a compliment to the quality of this headset mic. But as long as they can hear me, they can hear my crisp generic American dialect. Then we're good to go.
And yeah, let's see what we have to say. So, what we've got here. Oh, and Zach, will you be going to Keyforge Celebration? Dun dun dun.
Yes, that is the plan. Trying to lock in some of the final details, but yeah, that is the plan. I'm very excited about that.
Well, unfortunately for me, the boat left yesterday, so yeah, it's gonna take a while to get there. I'll maybe make it in time for next year, but I think this year's a bit of a stretch.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm excited. I know there's a number of reasons they're holding the event, and I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to help test out the currently proposed competitive play formats, and just give some feedback there, which I certainly will be doing. But nonetheless, I am excited. I'm excited that they're holding it for sure.
Awesome. And so what we're going to do, dear listener, today is go through a little bit about the 3 new proposed Keyforge competitive tournament formats. And I say new because there are some pretty whopping changes. It's Welcome to the Jungle 2.0. And Zach and I will probably be coming from very different angles. Just as a reminder for those of you new to us, I'm very much a casual player. For me, it's all about the excitement of discovery. I'm quite here for zany, wild, wacky, esoteric interactions. Zach, you come from more of the competitive side, don't you?
I do. I enjoy playing. I do enjoy the esoteric and wacky stuff. I in Netrunner, I was definitely a jank player trying to optimize a wacky off meta deck as much as possible, which is why I think I'm attracted to Keyforge. So I definitely like to play hard and play to win. But if I'm teaching a new player, usually I will give myself a bunch of chains just so I can play as hard as possible, but still be but still be just a wee kitten trying to bat the ball past them into the goal.
Which is awesome because you allow yourself to have the most fun you can possibly have whilst giving your opponent space to have exactly the same amount of fun. So, what could possibly go wrong there? We're going to talk about those three formats, but first I think we need to set the scene a little bit here. The FFG, no, not FFG, Ghost Galaxy Games. Yes.
That's a dirty word now in Pocock. That's a dirty word.
It is, isn't it? So GGG have said, to be clear, these competitive formats are not in lieu of support for casual play that Ghost Galaxy intends to start providing in 2023. So, Zach, how do you read that? I certainly read that as the standard kind of sealed stuff that we're used to seeing, where you go into a store, crack open a deck, and just play a few games, or the standard kind of Archon solo type thing where you stroll into a store, you bring a deck, and you play it with maybe a few chains on it. That I would imagine we're going to have to see clarity on that, but I don't think that's going away. What we're talking about here is the top level competitive formats, and I don't think all of the original formats landed, did they, Zach? Some of them did, and some of them were used more than others, but there's probably a lot of scope for innovation here to try different things, and it feels very Keyforge, right?
Yeah. I think what they mean by that casual play is the weekly store play, which really is it's the ground floor of Keyforge. Somebody walks into a store, you're there playing with a friend. This is the kind of structure that new player would walk into, that anybody who's been Keyforge curious up until this point, and all of a sudden there's official support that the store is partaking in, they come in. So we do not know the plans for that. That is how I'm going to be playing, 80 to 90% of my Keyforge. 80 to 90% of my Keyforge games, that structure, that format has not been announced yet. And we're having a perfectly good time doing single deck sealed at my locals. So we'll see what's proposed. I would love to honestly see minimal changes to the actual formats, but then official support as far as leagues, right? Like registering your deck and your player. You get bonus points for bringing maybe decks with wacky cards or wacky combinations. You get points for playing new decks different weeks. Whatever it is. I think their approach could look totally different at a casual level. So I can't wait to hear what they have planned for the ground floor.
No, nor can I. And I think, look, Christian T. Peterson and co. have already built up a lot of trust. They clearly love this game. They're putting their heart and soul into it. And we've seen a lot of positive energy coming from there so far. There's a lot of right moves they're making, but they've got to try stuff. This is innovation, right? You've got to try stuff. Some of it doesn't work. The stuff that doesn't work, you cast aside, you focus in on the stuff that does, and you build on it. If you don't try that stuff, you're never gonna evolve. And I think we're probably going to see elements here that we're not so happy with, but there's a lot to build on maybe as well. One thing maybe to mention is, I personally, I'm just going to be open. I've been quite shocked at sort of reading Keyforge Twitter and other things today, how toxic the conversation has become very quickly, and from people that I didn't necessarily expect to do that. And I think upon reflection, it comes from the fact that this game means a lot to a lot of the people that play it, and we all care about it deeply. And there's a lot of emotion enrolled into it, because it's so important to us. And
yeah, and what I will say to that is, I've mostly been choosing to, between the option to tweet or not to tweet. I've just chosen not to tweet. Because I understand and I actually really get a lot of the viewpoints that, so I will say I still have trust in Ghost Galaxy personally. There's a number of decisions I don't like currently, but I think that's why. But I'm excited to see that this is a test phase and that they are testing things out. That said, I'm not very excited that they chose to announce formats that change, unalterable decks after the campaign. that doesn't feel great to me. Now, do I still have a lot of trust in Ghost Galaxy that they're going to try to move forward with Keyforge in a way that is helps the game stay healthy and grow and get bigger? I do trust that, so I'm not despairing. But I I get why some people are reacting strongly, because this game means a lot to me too. And I do feel a bit of that rug pull, because I, like many people, have considered unchangeable decks, unalterable decks to be core to Keyforge. So to see them say, well, we're actually considering changing that, feels like a pretty big possible change. But again, they are just considering these formats. They're waiting for feedback. I've been talking with some people in just direct channels who, like me, aren't fans, or skipping ahead a little bit, not a big fan of Alliance. And I've been chatting with some people who also aren't, who have kind of sent me an overview of the feedback they gave. And so a lot of the feedback I've been seeing there has actually been very well phrased, that people are sending to Ghost Galaxy. And that's the entire point, right? That's the entire point.
Is probably a minority that are sort of maybe crossing the line there slightly, but nonetheless, it feels difficult to read, to be honest. Although, of course, people are entitled to share their own opinions. I think it's really important to just give a bit of thought to, the folks at Ghost Galaxy Games that are obviously going to make a few missteps in this approach. But they're working towards the same thing that we are, to bring back a game that we love. And this is interesting, because the thing we're talking about here is the fact that two of these three new formats have an element of constructed play to them. So it's not just grab a deck and go, or pick a deck and go. There is an element to kind of shuffle forge, almost, shuffle building decks from different house pods. And I think for me, I'd never had that barrier with Keyforge where I thought, oh, it is just grab a deck and that deck is unalterable. So I've often enjoyed that in the past of mixing things from different places, but I realized there can be less ramifications of that at a kitchen table than there can be at the top level of competitive play. So we're going to dive into that and those things. But I think if there was one takeaway to the way that I'm going to be treating this anyway is, I feel like almost format shaming in the competitive card game space is like kink shaping. There are different ways to play Keyforge, and I don't enjoy every way to play Keyforge, but that doesn't mean that I think it's a bad thing. There are going to be bad formats, and we're going to talk about some elements that might not work. But if it works, and if it's not broken, and if a certain group of people enjoy it, then hey, there's more people in this Keyforge family, and that's got to be exciting, right? Because I think the fact that there was no element of constructed in Keyforge has probably put a lot of people off Keyforge that would otherwise be enjoying it. So if we can keep everything we love about Keyforge, but also welcome in another cohort, wouldn't that be a beautiful thing?
Well, sure. I wouldn't be playing with those Alliance people, but that's fine.
I can do that, Zach. It's fine.
Yeah. No. It's yeah. I mean, I think the biggest. Well, let's go over.
Let's get in. Should we do Archon first?
Yeah. Let's go in order they are on the website here. So we're on keyforging.com/tournament formats and rules. And just to reiterate, as much as Ghost Galaxy is, there's a giant yellow bar up top saying the tournament formats presented below are currently in preliminary state and undergoing testing, such as during the 2022 Keyforge celebration. They may be subject to substantial change prior to December 31st.
And after that, they're solid and they're never changing again. And no, I'm sure that's not what it means. But
right. And these are the official formats of these are the in testing official formats of tournament level play. So these might be things that your store could host, but it'd be a big, probably weekend event. These would be things that, if there's an equivalent to Vault Tours again, that would they would be, aligned with one of these formats, either Sealed, Archon, or Alliance. So Sealed is it's a very interesting one. So they so sealed, instead of the traditional, which is you either get one deck or maybe three decks, and you pick one of those three decks and you play that for the whole time. Sealed is simply this: you get two sealed Keyforge decks, totally unopened. Then players simultaneously open their sealed decks and construct a single deck by selecting 3 house pods from the 6 house pods provided in the 2 sealed decks. Each selected house pod must be from a different house. A house pod is the set of 12 cards dedicated to one house within a single Archon deck, and deck creation must be completed within 30 minutes. Then they have a number of rules for how the tournament would actually work, which is super clear and great. I really like that. I think that solves a lot of confusion on tournament organizers' parts about what is the best way to run a Keyforge tournament, where they say double elimination for the elimination rounds, and then there's a playoff bracket, which are handled different numbers of games. That's relatively innocuous at the moment, so not the hot thing to address. So the idea is you get two Keyforge decks. You've got to build a single Keyforge deck out of your 6 deck pods. You can't double up on any houses, of course. And then it should also be noted, in between rounds, but between each round of a sealed tournament, before being seeded with the next opponent, players may calibrate their deck by substituting one or more house pods from their deck with one or more of their unused house pods. After calibration, a deck still must consist of 3 house pods from 3 different houses. So that is sealed. That is their proposal in testing for sealed tournaments.
And just to be clear, I have lots of thoughts on this one. And just to be clear, I don't think this is, again, to their comment, in lieu of just standard Monday night Keyforge, because, one of the drawbacks of this potentially is, particularly in markets where Keyforge has become really quite pricey. I mean, the price of Keyforge decks, if they're coming from the US, has probably doubled for the UK and Europe,
right,
in the last 3 years, just because of the kind of macroeconomic stuff, which would be prohibitive for kind of a Monday night play. So I think, if you're talking sort of Monday night Keyforge, hopefully, sealed is going to stay the same. But I love this format. And I'm sorry, Zach, if that makes you wince slightly, but I just think it's really, really cool. I think the traditional sealed for competitive play with the 3 decks had a few drawbacks before, and it's that thing that Christian spoke about on our lovely friends Help from Future Self, the interview he did with them, that there's this lack of agency sometimes and decision making, which can create bad feelings for players and the player experience. And I've certainly faced that before with sealed. I'll give you an example here, because I think tangible examples are often good for kind of drawing out this sort of thing. So I went all the way to Berlin for a sealed tournament, and it was Worlds Collide. I got 3 Brobnar decks. It was miserable. I think I ended with like 1-5, and I definitely picked the best deck. It was not the wrong call, but it was just miserable. And I compare that to today. So I saw these new formats, and Nina and I sat down and we played a new sealed game. There's a store in the UK that's been selling Worlds Collide pretty cheap. So I bought a few sealed boxes, and so we tried this with Worlds Collide. She got 2 decks with just Brobnar, and she was able to just go, well, I'm not playing either of those,
right?
And as a result, had a much more fun play experience, one that she wouldn't have had before. Essentially, you're choosing between, in the old world, one in 3, whereas now it's 3 and 6. But I still think you've got more agency around that, because the chances of having 4 bad houses in your pool is low, whereas the chances of having a bad house in each of your 3 decks might be slightly higher. I might be wrong here. Well, it's 3 and 4, isn't it? But it's also the fun, and we were talking about this, and this is interesting because she's about as casual player as you can possibly get. And she loved this.
Mm.
It was a kind of clear improvement for her. She's not someone that would be, knowing the card pool inside out, but it was the flavor of it for her, and the fact that she was able to build something. But Magic would never be a thing that she would touch, because it would be too much constructive. So maybe this is striking a good balance, but keep it to sort of high level play, because it's going to be prohibitive cost wise for newer players. I think you still keep that, one of the great things about Sealed is in some ways it's the most skill testing format, right? Because you've got to know a card pool for a set inside and out. It keeps that, and actually it adds an extra dynamic to it almost. The fact that you can shift things around a bit means that you're not stuck entirely if you get entirely wrong as well. So I personally think there's a lot to love here. I hope that it brings additional players into the game that maybe didn't play the game previously. It gives us a different way to think about things. I also think, I'm just plowing ideas here, Zach. I'm interested to hear yours. We'll get there in a second, but
yeah.
I think it creates a safe space for constructed play as well. And we're going to get to this, but constructed in limited looks very, 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 very different to constructed in open play, where you bring anything from your deck portfolio, if you like. So Sealed gives a safe space. You can't have someone with two 1 million SAS decks kind of finding the best houses in different things and plowing them together to an infinite destroyer combo. This is going to be, and also going forward, Ghost Galaxy can ensure that there aren't things that can combo off, so they can make Keyforge safe for this new constructed format. I just hope that the feedback we're seeing against the Alliance format that we'll speak in a little while about doesn't end up tarnishing this new Sealed format, because I love it. Okay, I've stopped now. Zach,
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure. One quick reaction to one thing you said at the end there, Ghost Galaxy designing with this 2-deck Sealed, if it ends up, final in this way. I don't think they should design with this in mind. I think they need to design for the regular single deck thing, because one, I don't think they should design for it, and two, I don't think they can. Looking at the limits of even some of the best paid professional card game design teams, and then what happens once the set goes out into the wild with Magic the Gathering or any number of other card games, I'm not sure they could catch everything, but I think Keyforge is also better positioned than most card games to help guard against that, either with the rule of 6 or a deck, graduating out via a power level mechanic, which is really cool. Right. A really cool idea that we never really got to see come to fruition.
That's a really good point. So perhaps Keyforge is already sort of made safe for this kind of thing. I mean, that you're going to get an odd Sealed pool where you've got a really weird maverick that's doing something awesome, but isn't that awesome rather than
that is awesome.
Problematic?
I would rather that deck dominate for a small handful of tournaments, and then after it accumulates enough points or whatever, it is quote unquote honorably banned. How about that? Honorably banned from competitive play. And what that does, that is think of how epic a moment that is to have a deck that is good enough and you play it well enough that it says, okay, this Archon has ascended. They opened a vault, found the secrets. It is now no longer allowed in competitive play because it topped out. And I think to earn that would be really cool. I think we've seen how helpful and kind of fun that is for the community. Hilariously, it's the first version I've seen of this actually being acted on, even though Keyforge had a different version of it first, is Flesh and Blood's Living Legends system, where the identities you play as accumulate points as that identity wins tournaments, and once it breaks a certain number, that identity is then quote unquote banned, honorably banned for winning too much. I think that would work great in Keyforge.
That is almost like we're banning houses, though, if we sort of transpose the Living Legends. But no, I see what you mean.
Two specific decks. Yeah, just a specific deck.
I would hasten to say that this is potentially even safer than that, because that crazy deck might rule for one tournament, but this is a sealed tournament, and the moment you're out of that, you've got another pool of decks and another pool of opportunities.
Yeah. So my coming back around, just my thoughts on this sealed, this in testing sealed format in general. I'm kind of carrying two different opinions in my head simultaneously. One is this like Keyforge purist idea of don't alter decks in Keyforge. That makes it not the jungle. Any changes to decks that way is breaking the sacred pact of Keyforge. But then I'm actually looking at the practical side of it, like you've been talking about, and I go, well, would this bring more people in a way that doesn't create a Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh type meta, which is what I want to avoid in my card games. I want to go to a tournament, either sealed or an Archon style open, bring your open deck tournament, and yes, I'll see archetypes and combos that people know are strong, but the decks are unique, so you never truly know what you're going to face. I remember an online tournament where JDG brought an insane animator deck that I was like, well, we all knew animator could do hilarious, crazy things, but this was the first deck I really saw compete at a top level doing crazy animator tricks. And I still want that, and I think in sealed, this could... I think to summarize my feelings on it is, if this style of sealed, open two decks, mash together house pods, if this style of sealed brings even more people into sealed tournaments and gives even more people a fun Keyforge experience, I'm game. I say that also holding the thought in my head that I tend towards being Keyforge purist. But because this isn't a moral, ethical, religious, foundational truth I'm trying to build my life on, I'm willing to bend. Right? I'd be willing to bend from saying, Keyforge decks can't be changed. I'm like, well, there might be a world where that experience is still good, it's still fun, and there's a small adjustment made to something I once held sacred that opens it up to even more people. So those are my thoughts on sealed so far.
Yeah, and I mean, for a game to survive, I think it has to evolve over time, and for it to grow in its appreciation by a larger group of people. You look at the way that people enjoy Magic. Some people really do enjoy this kind of style of constructed stuff of the Jumpstart, Shuffleforge type thing. Some people enjoy Commander. Some people enjoy purely limited. There are so many ways to play.
Most people enjoy Commander.
well, exactly. Yeah. I enjoy limited, but which is also my area of enjoyment in Keyforge. But sure. Not that really I enjoy MTG very much, but you know how it is. I think I wonder, Zach. I'm going to pose you a question.
Yeah.
If Alliance, which we're going to speak about later, wasn't here. Yeah. Okay. Breathe. Yep. Deep breaths. Crying. It's all okay. It's all okay. Are you crying?
No. I learned in my early 20s it's much easier to get angry instead of sad, because sad is a snowball. Anger I can handle.
You should speak to your therapist about that. I'm not entirely sure that's a healthy coping mechanism, Zach, but we'll park it for now. So if they hadn't announced Alliance, would you have just gone, hey, this is a cool sealed format, let's try it? And sort of there wouldn't have been that hesitation in you.
No, I think there's still the hesitation because it is altering a Keyforge deck. Yeah. Right. I think the solution to having a little bit of agency in version 1 of Keyforge in the FFG days was, in a bigger tournament, buy 3 decks, pick one. So you have some agency there. But I think, honestly, the thing that is winning me over, pulling me in that direction towards New Sealed, the in-testing format New Sealed, is the fact that there's Keyforge sideboarding for house pods. I think that is fascinating to me, that you open 2 decks. Now, of course, if you open 2 decks with the exact same houses, um, you're a little bit up the creek because you have the most limited versions of your options there. But that's neither here nor there. There's always going to be variance in the card game. But being able to go in between rounds and swap things out is an additional layer of skill testing that is going to help people feel like they have agency, because they do. It's going to help people exercise card pool knowledge, and even maybe adjusting for like the quote unquote meta of what people have picked and thrown together. So I think honestly that's the thing that is warming me up most to it, is that there is this new dynamic in between rounds of swapping out house pods. Again, this is grinding up against the Keyforge purist in me. There are two wolves inside Sweaty Zach right now. One is the Keyforge purist who never wants to alter a deck, and the other is this other wolf is glimpsing a possible bright future for this version of Sealed. So I really like the Keyforge sideboarding idea, as much as the purist in me doesn't want to admit that.
Yeah, interesting. I also, just to build on that, I agree with you, Zach. And I think it'd be great for new players as well, or just even returning players, because you don't need to know a set quite as well, and it means that anyone can pick up a couple of decks, and because I think there are quite a lot of people in Keyforge that want to go to a tournament day, like a proper tournament day, but don't really know the set that well and don't really want to do all that. And I think it makes it more accessible, because you can make a mistake and go, well, I shouldn't have included that house, should I? And you can just throw it out and throw it back in. Whereas it was probably a bad feel before that you couldn't do that. You didn't have that flexibility, and that probably penalized newer players more than it penalized more experienced players.
Yeah, and reflecting on my Sealed tournament experience, because all of the big events I went to, Primes and Vault Tours, were sealed of some kind. At least half of them were sealed Triad, which can go just drown in a lake. But when I did sealed Triad for Age of Ascension, my decks were somewhat stinkers. My best deck kept getting banned just based on houses, and that I think I could have played better and done better. But Richmond Vault Tour, which was 3 sealed solo, get 3 decks, pick 1, I got 3 stinkers, and I went 3-3, and I sweated hard to go 3-3 with like the deck I picked. Which, I looked back several times, I really felt like I picked it. And then when I did well at a Prime, I made top cut in Sealed Triad Worlds Collide. That was that was also not as quite of a fun experience for a number of reasons. But being locked into all of those decks was for that long was a little frustrating. So I think this could help. As somebody who loves Keyforge, it is sometimes it's easy for how much I enjoy Keyforge to overshadow the negative experiences I've had, when those negative experiences might have been the biggest feeling a new player had, so they didn't come back.
So what are we giving? In the Call of Discovery, we've got a green light, we've got an amber light, and we've got a red light. What are we giving this? I'm giving it a green light, Zach. What are you giving it?
I'm giving it an amber light. I wanna play it, and I intend to play it. I intend to play it, assuming I can book some travel up to Keyforge Celebration. But I'm giving it an amber light.
Okay, awesome. So overall, we like the new Sealed. Great. Yeah, I'm glad we agree on that.
Yes, trending positive. Shall I read us the new Archon?
Yeah, do.
So, new Archon, I'm calling it Triad Light. New Archon, the summary is: the Archon format pits a player's triad of Archon decks against opposing triads. Players must use careful consideration not only during gameplay, but in choosing the composition of their triad and in the elimination of an opposing deck prior to each game. Now, what they're doing here spiritually is they're taking the 3-deck triad format we had previously and slimming it down so that elimination rounds are best of 1, and then the top cut is best of 3. So I'll read it out here. Elimination rounds. Archon format tournaments are played over a sequence of elimination rounds, each round featuring a number of two-player matches, each match consisting of one game. Players are limited after losing 2 matches, also known as double elimination. Side note, personally, big fan of double elimination. Elimination rounds continue until only 8 players remain. After paired players are seeded for a match at the start of each elimination round, players must present their ready decks to their opponent. Now, ready is a specific kind of keyword here. After presentation, players simultaneously disqualify one of their opponent's decks. The disqualified deck may not be selected by its owner during the following step. Players then simultaneously select a deck from their own remaining ready decks. This is the deck they must play in the match. So, when would a deck not be ready? Or when would it become exhausted? So, after the first elimination round, any deck that won the prior round is exhausted, and as a consequence is not ready and cannot be among the ready decks presented to the opponent during the next round. So, a winning player can only present 2 ready decks for disqualification during the next elimination round. So that means if you win a game, the next round you play in, you will only have 2 ready decks to present to your opponent. They'll eliminate one, and then you're playing that one deck you have left. So if you win a round, you're going to be limited to only one deck at the mercy of your opponent, and one of the 2 decks you didn't win with. Now, if you lose a round, your opponent will still get to strike a deck that next round, but you'll have 2 decks to pick from that they did not strike. So it kind of balances out. If you're winning a bunch, you're going to be more restricted. If you're losing, you're going to be a little bit less restricted.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
In short, same. I think this is great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, Archon Solo, there maybe just wasn't quite enough going on, and it maybe leaned a little bit too much into the sweat, and maybe not quite enough agency sometimes. And I know that there were maybe issues with elements of Triad as it was before. Was it Triad, Zach, that was essentially going on until sort of midnight at times because there were 3 rounds, or was that adaptive?
Yes, Triad, anything Triad or adaptive that needs 3 games in the elimination rounds was going for a long time. The aforementioned Worlds Collide sealed Triad. I got knocked out of top 8 or top 4, I think, at about a little after 1 a.m. So
this has kind of mashed together the good stuff from Triad and the good stuff from Archon Solo, that kind of traditional Keyforge power game, then, would you say?
Yes, it has generated. It is a format where you can do best of 1 for the elimination rounds while still preserving a bit of that, the deck selection strategy. And that's one reason I loved original Triad is if you go back and listen to our episode with Dave Cordero on it, Triad, well, can look intimidating at the surface, and like it really is the kind of one of the biggest whale formats because of the choice and the deck striking and then matchups. You can actually have plenty of decks in your mid 70s or a really strong upper 60s deck that if you know your matchups and you know your decks and you strike the right deck by your opponent and you play it smart, you can swing with some of the best of them with some kind of like mid to upper tier decks instead of having to have this kind of cream of the crop trio. And I think this captures some of that spirit while making the tournament practical to actually run. Having double elimination, like I said, love double elimination. Having double elimination and a trio of decks. Now, of course, you'll have to have all your decks. You'll have to really know their matchups. There are going to be whole discussions again about, do you bring 3 different decks? Do you bring 3 decks that do similar things? What's your kind of memory load on each of these decks? Because once you win with one, by default, you won't be playing it the next round. So I think there's a whole lot of kind of game beyond the game to be playing during a tournament with this format, and I like it. I like it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I almost they're kind of stepping back from the whale piece a little bit there and making it more accessible for nimble keyforgers that like finding interesting things in their decks.
Well, I think because
opponents.
I think because if you win, you have less choice and your opponent strikes something. I do think this is going to favor kind of bigger, stronger Archon solo collections a little bit more than original Triad. I will say that, but they're doing it at the cost of getting the benefit of being able to do best of one rounds. Because that's the other thing, is that best of one can be a bit swingy. So a consistent Keyforge deck is really going to help you out there. So because I have seen some people, and I don't know how much I agree with this directly, but I'll just voice what I've seen a few places, is that because of how this is structured, it is pushing more towards owning 3 strong decks than even original Triad was. I don't know how it will play out, because really not a lot of people have, the community has not thoroughly tested this format yet. That's why it's in testing. So we'll have to see what shakes out. I do hope, like you said, it is sticking closer to what I think was the true spirit of original Triad, where you have, a couple, like if you have a couple dozen decks, you're probably going to have, if you play your matchup smart, you will have some good, you will be able to have success. And I'm really hoping it still captures that part of the spirit while making a tournament actually feasible time-wise.
And for me, the kind of beat down with the strongest deck isn't really my vibe, but I also see, I see why it's important to have that in a card game. And, I think it's an important thing for Keyforge to have that sort of decks of the champions sort of format. And I feel this maybe could be the one that plays that role for at least the foreseeable future. Do you?
Yes, I think perhaps they could make some adjustments, but I think they hit a pretty good middle line here between having a very cool format where you bring several open decks and being able to actually have a tournament that people will play through. That being said, in the greater context of what we are currently seeing as options for competitive, I don't know if I like this being the only bring an unaltered open deck format. I think this would be paired great with something else that's not Alliance, because right now we have, Sealed is pretty much sealed with some adjustments that we talked about. This is the kind of big brainy matchup format, which I love. And then I feel like something else could serve in that third slot other than Alliance, but we'll get to Alliance in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to get onto that. And we're also going to get onto some of the formats that we maybe would like to see and the tweaks and changes that we would like to see after that. The one thing I do want to talk about, Zach, before we give this a green or an amber or a red light, is double elimination. So this is the thing that I kind of shrugged my shoulders at kind of constructed on the first glance. And I was like, oh, that's cool. They're trying something different. I like that. Again, we'll get to the details of Alliance in a second. But yeah, the double elimination was the thing that really worried me. Because one thing I quite like about, I'm not that competitive. So if I play an Archon event, whether I bring a great deck or a mediocre deck, I'll still be playing for the whole day, and I'll end up playing with people that have got similar decks, later on, even if I get stomped the first 2 times. But yeah, in this, you get eliminated, and I thought, is this going to be Monopoly, where someone buys up all the houses and then no one else can afford a house? I mean real life. Or is this going to be like, something where we can actually do that? But there is an extra section for this. So the second amber is what they're calling the best of the rest title, which sounds very Keyforge. It's for players that are eliminated.
Yes, it is a secondary tournament designed so that as soon as you're knocked out of really any of these formats, if you want to just keep playing, you can go over to the second amber event and then just slot right in whenever you're knocked out. So I love that, because it means you're going to be playing Keyforge the whole time if you want to. I love that.
I love it too. And yeah, listeners, you'll find me in second amber if I'm at a tournament. So come
knocked out by me.
Yeah, probably knocked out by Sweaty Zach. Yeah. Or if I knock you out, can you imagine the podcast uproar if I knocked you out, Zach? Blimey.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So I will say something they do for second amber At the very bottom, I haven't seen discussion about this. It's probably because there's so many other things, exciting things to talk about. But the way, so Second Amber, you basically just keep playing the original events format alongside the first, slotting in new people each time. And what happens is at the very bottom it says, after each Second Amber round, enter the names of all winning players into the Second Amber pool. At the end of Second Amber, draw 8 random names from the pool, each of which is awarded a prize. Consequently, winning several games during the Second Amber improves a player's chance to win a prize or even multiple prizes. So, and of course, they can change the number of names that are drawn from the pool. But the more you're playing Second Amber, the more often, the better a chance you have to win a Second Amber prize. And I think that's fantastic that that's baked in. That you get to just keep playing, and then if you win a few games, you have a chance at getting, whatever this kind of Second Amber consolation prize is for winning, for winning some games during Second Amber. I
love it. It's fantastic, and it prevents those feel bad experiences, and it's great for people like me that like turning up to tournaments but actually don't really do the sweat stuff. I like shiny things. I want the shiny stuff, but I don't like getting sweaty.
We could license our name IP at least to Ghost Galaxy, and they could just call Second Amber tournaments Call of Discovery tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there would be some brand synergy there, which you can't deny. You really can't deny. Yeah, maybe we should have that conversation with them. But how are we broadly positive on Second Amber? Does that get green light from us?
Yes, I think it's a feel good. It's a feel good edition at the cost of absolutely nothing else. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, and
bright green light.
Great. So bright green light, and on Archon, is that a bright green light as well? Is that a green light? Is it an amber?
Yes, I'm going to say a green light. If they find in testing some adjustments to make, I think that'll be fine. But I really think they're finding a marriage of the competitive and meta spirit of Triad, the matchup spirit of Triad, plus a format that's actually, it won't just turn into an endurance match, which
awesome.
Sweaty Zach's okay with, but I get that we don't want people to just be completely brain dead and sloppy at the end.
Not my vibe. Not why I'm there. And things really genuinely would get sweaty at that point, and I'm not there for that either. So. So we're essentially, because I'm green on those two as well. So we're broadly green on sealed. With there might be a hint of different color in there.
Amber on sealed for me. Amber on sealed.
There's a tinge
of green. There's a tinge of green in the corner that Ghost Galaxy may be able to coax out of me.
You're. I swear, Zach, we're going to talk about this format in a year's time, and you're going to be loving it.
The worst part about you saying that, Ed, is I think you're right, but I don't want to say that out loud.
I'm going to absolutely love lording this one over you.
Yeah.
Pretty much green on everything so far then, just to watch Zach's reaction. So I can see Zach's face, listeners, and I'm really enjoying prodding him on this one because I can see that he's really challenged by
Amber for now. I'll be happy to be wrong, but I'm Amber for now on sealed because that one wolf still inside me, purest Keyforge wolf, is growling.
So if we're also pretty happy about everything, what's everyone making such a fuss about, Zach? Do you want to start off on this whilst we're still happy and laughing?
So I will read Alliance to. Oh, they actually have to respace their font. This one's not quite fitting.
I'm loving the website overall. Is it really does kind of evidence the care and attention they're taking.
I'm impressed. Awesome. I'm impressed. Yep.
Let's cut them some slack, guys, overall. But we'll go into this first.
The summary of Alliance. The Alliance format challenges not only a player's game skills, but also deck construction strategy by allowing Alliance decks to be created from up to 3 different Archon decks. Players must bring, to an Alliance tournament, 1 Keyforge Alliance deck consisting of 3 house pods recruited from a player's collection of Archon decks. Each house pod must be from a different house. 3 house pods in the Alliance deck may be recruited from up to 3 different Archon decks. A house pod is the set of 12 cards dedicated to one house in a single Archon deck. Elimination rounds. Alliance format tournaments are played over a sequence of elimination rounds, each round featuring a number of two-player matches, each match consisting of one game. Double elimination again, skipping ahead. Playoff rounds. Then nothing special about the playoff rounds. Those, of course, are best of three, like the others are.
You did miss the bit about Keyforge Unchained being completely legal in this one.
Very funny. That's not true. That's not true. That is
rumors.
That is a lie from the depths of Dis. So, Alliance. Okay, and they even say deck construction in here, right? So, and I've already been tempted over to touch on this enough during this episode, but I'll just summarize. This is deck construction. Like I mentioned, that Keyforge purist wolf that growled a little bit at Sealed. This wolf is howling at the idea angrily of deck construction being a major format, especially at the cost of a different kind of open Archon format here. Yeah. So I'll get into my feelings in a second, both in like why I wouldn't want to play it, and two, the philosophical, what I will phrase as a possible philosophical threat to Keyforge if this is a big supported format. But Ed, what was your reaction to reading about Alliance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different than yours, and I'm going to defer to you on the intricacies of does this format work in practice, because for me it's not a thing about constructed versus fixed Keyforge decks at all. It's a thing about, does this format work logistically? Does it make sense? Does it make sense for the game in terms of bringing in new players? Does it make sense for the game in terms of, is it going to create bad feeling play experiences? And I think those are kind of the key two key metrics here. Almost, we have to sort of, we want this game to be successful, so we want those two key metrics to be successful above and beyond, the formats that we want to play. As long as there are formats that we want to play in ways that we want to engage with this game, it's all good. But there might be ones that others want to play that we don't. So I was kind of cool with that. But I also looked at it and then thought, how is that actually going to work in practice when, thinking about the almost the sweatiness of Keyforge is sometimes curtailed by the limits of the decks themselves. The fact that you can just have a NARP in the best deck in Keyforge, a Maverick Legacy NARP in the best Mass Mutations deck in Keyforge, and that's Keyforge, and that's quite special, because I find it funny because that NARP must really irritate whales. I think it is an equalizer for Keyforge, that restriction in open play. I am all up for trying a constructed format of open play, but not one that creates bad feel events for me. And at that point, Zach, I'm going to hand over to you, because you're the one with the depth of tactical Keyforge knowledge, and you're going to be able to tell me, both logistically, does this work, and emotionally, your feelings about it as well. Because I think we can't discount the sort of the feeling of the Keyforge community around this, even though sort of Christian T. Peterson has been, I think he was expecting something like this from, he's been sort of laying the ground in interviews that he's been having.
Which honestly, I totally respect him for saying, hey, some people aren't going to like it. And then he was right. Right. I respect the dedication to development of the game, to serve the game, make it big, have a lot of people playing it, big fun events, cool community, that sort of thing. So that being said, the reason there's that, the tinge of green light inside of my amber with Sealed is because it's sealed, it's intraset. There's not the ability to look across a whole collection, a whole teams collection. Now, I love teams in Keyforge, but in that Sealed format with two decks, there's not that ability to look across a vast number of decks and sets to then combine the most degenerate stuff. Because what happens is, once you go between sets, that's when you get the most degenerate stuff. So a quick shout out to Nova of Decks of Keyforge. Nova put together, within 24 hours of this announcement, I think is the timing on it, the ability to create alliance decks inside of your Decks of Keyforge account if you're a Patreon supporter, which I proudly am. I proudly am. And so I put together a alliance deck with just looking at what people were saying the meta could be. What's the OTK setup that you can make in a deck? And so if you go for United Action, the Worlds Collide Star Alliance action that has alpha that says play for the remainder of the turn. You may play cards. You may play cards matching a house for any card you already have in play. You may not use cards this turn. If you pair that with library access, of course, which is play for the remainder of the turn. Every time you play a card, you may draw a card, purge library access. And then if you pair that with some, let's say, hunting with it, which is plenty of amber pips, key charge, Nepenthe Seed, just any other tools outside of that, as soon as you get your United Action and library access and you have a card or two in play, you can just rule of 6 all the cards in your deck and just one turn kill OTK. So now I will say that is currently the Keyforge community's research on what's the most degenerate thing you could do with this. A few people were able to test it out last night. Shout out to Devin, aka Flaming Hobo, who runs the Ancient Bear Republic League. Amazing community member, huge fan. Devin tested this out with some people, did the United Action Library Access OTK testing, and he made a joke that here's the result of it. He did a screenshot of the GameFound page where it says number of players. It usually says 2. He changed it to a 1. Because it's library access Nepenthe Seed, except more powerful. Whoever draws the combo first wins. So that's the possibility of what the most degenerate thing is, as far as, so this is all in the context of what's the most negative play experience you could have. They already eroded out library access Nepenthe Seed, where turns would take way too long. You might OTK, you might not. Somebody's just sitting there, watch you count your cards for rule of 6. And this just goes back to that vein. So I think if they keep this, and I would rather this would be replaced by something else personally, but if they keep this, I've seen suggestions to move to 2 decks maximum for an alliance deck. You're just mashing 2 decks together. You're picking from that, very much like Sealed. And it has to be from the same set, also like Sealed. So if I'm going to mash together some United Action stuff, it's also going to be with other Worlds Collide shenanigans. Now, what that lets you do, so they have balanced, generally speaking, they have balanced intra set play, set versus its same set against itself. Are there sometimes degenerate things? Yes. But it's basically making hacksawed together decks within a set and still using all those mechanics that existed together still together. If you allow me to take a Worlds Collide deck and a Mass Mutation deck and a Coda deck, that's where things start to get completely degenerate, and it's whoever just draws the combo first wins, essentially. There's not going to be as much room for different kinds of decks to have a chance or to get creative or to have fun and interesting matchups, which I believe is the heart of Keyforge.
Okay, that's a really interesting format then that you said. And one thing we maybe haven't spoken about here is the reasons why they've done it. And do you know what? These guys have had Keyforge for a few months and they've already done so much. And It's a small team, right? So we really do have to cut them some slack here. I realize, people might not like this, but that's the whole reason they've taken this out for us, and why there's a big yellow warning thing here is so that people can go out and find those degenerate combos that might break these, because they don't have the time to do it internally. They need us to go out and look at that stuff. And one thing that they're really trying to do here, and Christian's definitely spoken about this, is make some of those decks in our collections that are just sat there, make them useful. And yes, we can play them for PvE and we can play them for Kitchen Top, and we can do our own constructed Shuffleforge type thing. Note that I really want it to be called Shuffleforge, and I'm slightly disappointed here. We can do that for PvE or Kitchen Top, but this is different. But it is how do we bring those decks in and make them relevant at the top level? do you, Zach, think that sort of equivalent of sealed, of what constructed looks like for sealed, but for essentially more of an Archon style event
Right.
would be? Do you think that would work overall? Do you think there is a case for trying it?
I think there's a case for experimenting it because so I'm a theater kid. I have a theater major from my university. The rule in theater was always with acting, go big, and the director will go big with your choice, make a bigger choice, a more interesting choice, be louder, and the director will bring you back down if needed. Unfortunately for people with working ears around me at restaurants or any public spaces, that's also my approach to just talking generally. Getting a chuckle out of my wife as I make that joke here.
And mine too, actually. So, we've never met in person, but I think it does not surprise you, and it doesn't surprise me either. So that's
amazing.
Good.
So with that in mind, the concept of go big and rein it in, I can respect them going big and then reining it in later. Not even proposing an intra-set 2-deck thing, just going full. Because I think they knew that specific card construction would be ridiculous and instantly broken, right? You can truly build an OTK, turn 1 OTK deck at that point. Probably. So they went as big as wouldn't completely shatter gameplay. And so I expect them to rein it in. I don't think this solves the I have a whole bunch of unused decks I have hundreds of unused decks in my bin problem. I think that is a problem card games have that they always will have. I actually think the best answer to that is adaptive, which we can talk about in a little bit. But I don't think this is going to engage longtime players, whether casual or competitive, who have big collections, who then want to just throw things together. If this was like a side event where people do it to find interesting things and explore weirdo combinations that they don't own and they're making an alliance, I think that's fun and I think that's cool. But as far as a competitive event where it says, hey, we're expecting you to come, know all the rules, play well, try your hardest, bring your fire, let's go. I don't think this works for that because Keyforge is the cards are designed without choice in mind. So when all of a sudden your choice opens up to your entire collection, if it's a bigger collection, or your entire team's collection, then your entire team can show up with, decks that are nearly OTK decks. And I don't think that's going to be fun for people. I don't think that adds enjoyment to going back to your old decks. I think there's some degree of, we have a bunch of decks, not all of them are going to be played, that aren't solved outside of very interesting adaptive or like a SAS climb, like I'm doing to enjoy all my decks.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it'd be difficult to sort of do a SAS climb in person in a officially supported style thing.
Yes, 100%.
SAS, but
yes,
but it's a difficult one. Okay, so just to summarize, before we go on to what good alternatives would be and good additional formats would be, are we saying a no for Alliance as it is, a red for Alliance as it is in its current state, but potentially a slightly more of an amber tinge if it's the style that you mentioned that was more akin to sealed of 2 decks from the same set?
It's a red from me either way. I think it's a red from me either way because I think that intra-set version is better. I would still rather have something closer to quote unquote pure Keyforge, that unchangeable, unalterable deck idea. And I will say the one thing that worries me, I'm not 100% certain this would happen. It would depend on how Ghost Galaxy handles this. Having Alliance definitely in its current state, very much subject to change, of course, in testing. Having Alliance in its current state and having Keyforge be this much closer to fully constructed, where like it's a green light for OTK decks, this sort of thing. That to me might be a philosophical misstep that multiplies later. If they greenlit it like this right now, I could probably go to Sealed, have a ton of fun. I could go to Archon, have a ton of fun, and just not play Alliance, and it would be fine. But what does it look like down the line? Now, there's multiple factors involved in Magic the Gathering's product development, and of course, they're successful. They're owned by a giant company. I think that's a big part of it. But a lot of what you see in Magic the Gathering is things are included in, like, somebody is playing one format, and then their format keeps getting cards built for other formats. And the lines aren't clear. It gets muddied because they're so invested in, say, like, making things specifically for Commander, but then they muddy those cards into the other types of play as well. That's just, one thing people work through. Of course, owning your play experience, very important. We'll always say that. But I think that is a possible philosophical risk, is that if Alliance, especially in its current form, is green lit, if they start designing for Alliance, it could affect the rest of the game where, yes, I'm just letting other people play Alliance, and that's great. But if it starts to affect the way I play Keyforge, then I'm sad, right? Then I'm sad.
No, that makes complete sense. So what you're saying is you don't think that Keyforge Unchained should be legal in this? No, I joke.
Nobody says that. Oh,
chaos.
Besides, most of those decks are just going to be pure jank, terrible chaos, which will be fun for a game or two. It'll be fun for a game or two, but anyways,
I have 2 displays of that at great cost.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I'm excited. But no, I think this makes sense, right? And I think I'd be surprised if they did greenlight it in its current format. So I don't think we have to worry too much about that. But we'll see. They're trying different stuff. That is cool. It's exciting overall. Let's dive on, because we've gone quite long. So let's dive on to some of the formats that we might consider. First of all, though, Zach, because I get the feeling you're not going to mention this, do you think that there is any other way of incorporating Constructed into Keyforge that, would be more constructive? Oh, see what I did there?
Yeah. As far as Open Archon, look at your giant collection, build something version, I don't think so. I mean, I think I could live with 2-deck intraset Alliance. I think that's enough restrictions for creativity and interesting matchups to still happen. I'm not sure that would then accomplish what they want to with attracting the really, people who really want to build a straight power deck. I mean, it might. You could get some really degenerate stuff, especially in Mass Mutation, where all your enhancements landed in one house, right? You could get some really cool stuff there. But I don't really think there's any version. I think, I don't think so.
So essentially, keep Constructed to the kitchen table and to limited play.
Yep.
Cool.
I mean, I think if they wanted
versions, okay.
Yeah, I think if they wanted to sell the idea of, and I won't go into what a cube is for those who don't know, but if they wanted to sell a Keyforge cube or something, that keeps it from going outside its bounds, right? But yeah, I don't think there's a version of this that I like that I think really even answers the problems they want it to, quote unquote, problems they want it to answer.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So keep Constructed to limited or don't do it in your mind. For me, I'm cool with it being in limited. I do worry about Alliance. I like the idea of it, but I want it to be anti-bad feelings for non-sweaty players. And I'm not convinced it is at the moment in its current form as Alliance. As Sealed, great. But as Alliance, not sure. So what's missing, Zach?
What I think is missing, and I'm going to say this in the context of what they're clearly establishing as one of their values for competitive play here, which is double elimination, single game rounds into a top cut, right? So I'm looking at that, which I love. I love that they're sticking to that. I love that it's clear. Huge fan.
And consistent across different formats. Great.
Mm-hmm. I think, and this is where Sweaty Zach is going to really come out here. I think the answer, and I could also be wrong. This is really my suggestion to test because I think we've seen it in the community enough where I think it would work. I think the other slot that would help fill things here that would touch on the use your old decks thing. Now, not all of them, but it would allow you to go in. I think adaptive best of one into adaptive best of three what would be the great third competitive format. Adaptive best of one being where you and your opponent look at each other's decks that you've brought. You each pick one to play. If you pick different decks, then you just play what you picked. If you pick the same deck, then you chain bid on it. I've had a lot of success playing Keepers of the Strong Chind, a super janky Brobnar Worlds Collide deck, very much mid-tier, not great at all. I've had a lot of success with that in best of one and best of three adaptive. And I will say it is mostly on the chain bidding side. I'm not in there. Now, of course, there are some games where I pick Keepers and then I win because the other person picked their deck. But that's because I knew the matchup just by reading the deck list. So I will say a lot of the skill here is in deck list reading and chain evaluation on your decks. And you can lose the game before that happens. But if it's going to be lose the game before that happens is in you bid wrong, pick the wrong deck, and you just don't win because of that. Yeah. I will say I think that's okay if it's in a competitive format. If it's in a competitive format where it's like, this is a tournament, we're expecting you to come, we're expecting you to know it, people will practice if it's one of three, and then people will get better at deck list reading, chain evaluation. I was actually just talking with don't know how to say his name, but JLMTL, Canadian Keyforge player, was chatting quite a bit about with him about adaptive, and the skills I found in adaptive playing Keepers the Strong Chind for over 150 games during the pandemic, especially online. So I think it could be good. I have also seen plenty of other similar formats from the community that involve like guessing betting on which deck is going to win. Of course, you'd need to guard against just betting the other deck is going to win and then just tanking the game, just making sure that's not rewarded in tournament play. But I think adaptive would. I think their new Archon is the bring your power decks format. I think adaptive best of one and best of three could be you're weaponizing your deck knowledge format. It does move a lot of the game to the deck eval and chain bidding, but I think if that's an official format, then people will learn it, and it's top tier play for a reason, right? Yeah. So that's my suggestion, and then it lets you use your janky decks. I think you can bring janky decks to adaptive and do really well. The current thought is bring strong decks, but I think you can bring janky decks and go back into your weird old decks collection and have success.
And decks that are hard to play because you're going to be better at playing them than your opponent is.
For sure.
I've always enjoyed adaptive when I've played it in the past. I'm not particularly sweaty myself. So I can agree with you. I think the idea of not playing adaptive again in a tournament is a bit sad because I like the idea of bidding on stuff as well. I think it adds an extra kind of crunchiness, and as you rightly say, allows you to bring decks that you might not sort of bring otherwise. And just like Archon regular, you can limit it to one set or a group of sets if you like to kind of make things even more crunchy. So there are always ways of doing that. Maybe a shame it's missing here. In terms of one thing with adaptive that can be an issue is the three games.
Right, which is why you want to do best of one for those initial double elimination rounds.
Okay. Yeah. Would you then go up to 3? Do you think?
For the double for the playoffs, yes. Yeah, for the playoffs, I would think so. I'd have to think about that a bit because all you're doing by going from best of one adaptive to best of 3 adaptive is you either just give people more information before they're chain bidding in game 3, or you're allowing somebody a chance to take both games very impressively right? Winning with both different decks. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure just straight moving to the best of 3 is the best solution there, but I think adaptive would fill the third competitive slot and give a great variety to the
Cool.
competitive scene.
I'd keep it best of 1 personally, but that's probably more to do with my attention span than anything else. But there are some decks, particularly Dark Tidings, that can go pretty long. So
Right.
and you do get the crunchiness of the decision making in one game. There's always going to be the variances with other with other
And
formats. Though.
in Sealed and Archon, of course, speaking of our new in testing formats, the playoffs are all best of 3. The playoffs are all best of 3. So, but yes, adaptive will tend to go longer because there's going to be fewer two wins and out. So
awesome. So we're going to see a lot more of this over the coming weeks and months. I think it's fair to say they are moving at quite a speed, but let's be friendly to our new sort of what do I call it? The new caretakers of this game that we all love, because they want to do the same thing we want to do. They want to make it the best game possible for the greatest number of people to keep this going for a long, long time. Yeah. So I think we don't want to make them feel awful. We don't want to scare them off from trying things either, because that might impede the innovation that kind of Keyforge is all about, that, right? Right. But at the same time, obviously, we've got to give our feedback for stuff that doesn't make sense so much. But we can do that in a constructive way.
Yes, I do encourage people to give feedback. I've just been, really sitting on my thoughts, especially about Alliance, thinking about it. So go ahead, send your thoughts into Ghost Galaxy. Maybe write it out, and if you, like I have, right? This game means a ton to me. If you feel emotional about it, write it out, like sleep on it, look at it the next morning, and say, okay, how can I phrase this to a human I'd be sitting across from, and then send it off. I totally get feelings of intensity seeing construction come into Keyforge. But Ghost Galaxy wants our feedback. This is a testing phase. If you want to say to them, I probably will. I'll probably submit a contact us form or something saying, I think at least for Open Archon, constructed doesn't hurts the spirit of the game in a big way. I'll probably put together a note. Saying that. Like I said, I might be able to be won over on Sealed. But yeah, definitely, because they want to hear that. They want to hear that for sure.
Good quote, Zach. So Ghost Galaxy Games, I think that this new Sealed might be my favorite format in a year's time, but I can't admit that yet. So I'm going to have to
right.
put some question marks next to it and then talk about Alliance. Sorry, I'm really trolling you, Zach, but it's all good. Hey, Keyforge is exciting at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on. Isn't this much better than Silence and Misery?
Yeah, much better than Silence. I love that they're throwing. There's a friggin' Keyforge keynote for they're going to talk for up to an hour at the first day of Keyforge celebration. Like, how cool is that going to be if you're able to make it? Like, sitting there listening to them talk about Keyforge, and they care about the game. They do, even if they have made a choice where I go, wait, what, really? They want to hear the feedback. They care about the game, and remember, their livelihoods, like I said a few episodes ago or last episode, who knows? Time is wibbly wobbly. Their livelihoods are this game. This company is depending on this game. They want the feedback. They want it to succeed. Even if they do something that makes me raise an eyebrow.
But they will do that, and they'll do that again.
That's right.
But that's fine, because as long as they do stuff that we like as well, and and right their wrongs, and not all Keyforge is going to be for everyone. Some people aren't going to play PvE. Some people aren't going to play all the formats. But as long as there's enough to keep us enjoying the game and to bring in other players, it's all gravy. It's all gravy. I'm going to go and check flights for this Keyforge celebration, and I'll speak to you later, Zach.
Yep, do it, Ed. Do it. Awesome. Well, thank you, dear listener, for listening to Call of Discovery. As always, we have, oh gosh, there's so much. We have and it's mostly me doing random stuff when I can't bear not to make content. At callofdiscovery.com, there's links to the stream, the blog, all of our other episodes, of course. The Twitter's pretty active with me on there, so go check it out. Support us on Patreon if you like. We're all over the place.
Thanks, everyone. Have you answered the call of discovery?